Hey, this is Chris from Rekkid Talk, and this is going to be yet another episode of the Venn diagrams, where I take three musical ideas and I do set theory with them, looking at the two-way and three-way intersections. So last time I did Crosby, Stills, and Young. This time I'm going to do Love, Strom, and Hatfield. Or in other words, it's going to be based on the three key members of the Blake Babies. And so what I'm holding up, I'm doing the three-way intersection first because all three of them are on this. So going from left to right in the photo, left you got Juliana Hatfield. Regular viewers know I'm a big fan of hers. Depending on the lineup, she was either the rhythm guitarist or the bass player. When it was a three-person lineup, she played bass and did lead vocals on most of the songs. In the middle, you have Frida Love, who was the drummer of the band. And then the guy sitting down furthest to the right, that is John Strom. John Strom was the lead guitarist and occasional lead vocalist of the Blake Babies. And so what is Innocence and Experience? Well, Innocence and Experience is a compilation that Mammoth Records released when Juliana Hatfield had her popularity. And this is a recent reissue on vinyl by American Laundromat Records. My original copy of it, which I didn't dig out for this video, was actually on cassette. And so now let's look at the single values with just a single member. So what happened was that when the Blake Babies broke up around 1991, Juliana Hatfield went off, made this album for Mammoth Records, as she was still under contract with them. This is called Hey Babe, so this was her initial, we're supposed to show the gatefold, so there's the gatefold. This was her very first solo record, released in 1992. And so, of course, one of the famous songs, the very first song on here, is Everybody Loves Me But Robert Fithen. Yes, I'm going to call Robert Fithen out. He's doing his big ranking of albums from the year 1992. Over 200 records. He thinks this is the worst record of 1992. I like Robert, but I strongly disagree. I mean, come on, that Trickster record is worse. And then, of course, much later on, we had some solo works by the other members. So Frida Love, I could have pulled up Mysteries of Life or the obscure Project Lola, neither of which involved Juliana or John. But I'm going to go with the band from the late 2010s, early 2020s, Chicago-based sort of indie pop band called Sunshine Boys. Their second and final album, Work and Love. So Frida's represented on the right there. Then Jackie Schimmel is the bass player, and then the lead guitarist and vocalist, Dag Julin, in the middle. He's also been in Poi Dog Pondering. And then I guess this is what they love on the back. So I guess Dag loves coffee, and Jackie loves cats, and Frida loves books. And so I think this is the better of their two albums. I Was Already Gone and Infinity Girl are both a couple really cool tunes. Cheap Kiss record, so very indie sort of stuff. And since Frida's retired from drumming, Sunshine Boys are no longer active as a group, so we probably will not see a third record. And then what about John Strom? Well, he was in several bands after the Blake Babies broke up, some of which will be mentioned later on in this episode. He's released several solo albums. He went back to law school, became a music industry lawyer. So music was kind of, he's become more of a hobbyist in terms of his musical career, as the law is the top priority. He did spend a period of time a few years back as the president of Rounder Records. But this solo album that he released in 2023, which I named as my best of 2023, so John P. Strom, something to look forward to. I know he lives in the Nashville area nowadays. This was put out on Propeller Sound Records. The first new album in 15 years from the co-founder of Blake Babies, former Antenna and Lemonheads member. We'll be talking about those bands. Something to look forward to is an album shaped by life-altering loss and a reworked devotion to the sometimes transcendent work of songwriting. So basically, I read the hype sticker to you. So obviously, this is a very under the radar, very singer-songwritery sort of record. Not like his hardcore punk days back in the 80s or his jangle pop days with the Blake Babies. And so those are all your one-ways. And so we've now got the two-way intersections. So let's do the easier ones first. So when the Blake Babies broke up and Juliana did Hey Babe, well, John and Frida formed a band called Antenna. This was their first album called Sway, also on Mammoth Records with a couple other folks, including Jake Smith, who eventually became Frida's husband, as John and Frida had been high school sweethearts, and then as their relationship went south, Frida was sort of in and out of Antenna during the few-year history of this band. Obviously, this did not do as well as Juliana's solo record, as Antenna never got signed by a major label. So there's Antenna Sway. There was a comeback record by the Blake Babies in the early 2000s. They did a single one. And then Juliana and Frida kept working together and put out a couple albums under the name Some Girls. This was the first one called Some Girls Feel It. So you got Juliana with her bangs in the middle, Frida on the right, and they brought in Heidi Gluck. She's the one on the left. You can see there was even a hype sticker on this jewel case. This has never been released on vinyl. I wonder if this is among the master tapes that Juliana has apparently lost and thrown away over the years. But Necesito is a very good song on here. The Prettiest Girl. Although the second Some Girls is pretty good as well. And then what's the trickiest one to do where we might have the empty set coming in, but I'm going to do a bit of a cheat, so we're not going to use the empty set, is we're going to say that Juliana and John were both in the Lemonheads, which is a true statement. However, they were never in the Lemonheads at the same time. And so what happened was, during the late 80s, the Lemonheads and the Blake Babies very much ran in the same circles. The second Lemonheads record called Creator did feature young John Strom there in the lower left-hand corner on drums. You, of course, got Evan there in the upper left-hand corner. At some point, somebody bought this for 25 Deutschmarks. You can see that number 9, Luca's crossed out. So Blake Babies, the Lemonheads did a cover of Suzanne Vega's Luca. That was released as a single, but they didn't put it on the CD. They put instead a cover of Kiss's Plaster Caster, which even by Kiss standards is a relatively ridiculous song. Evan was also part of the Blake Babies for a period during this late 80s time as well. And then I know in the mid-90s, John Strom then did have a second spell on the Lemonheads as a touring guitarist, but he was the drummer on this, the second album, Lemonheads Creator. And if I remember right, I think the person on the front of this was like some random friend of theirs. And then, of course, more famous album by the Lemonheads on Atlantic Records is It's a Shame About Ray, which, of course, does not involve John Strom, but it does involve, Lemonheads records always involve Evan Dando, and this one involves Juliana Hatfield as well. And so Juliana took on the bass because Nick Dalton from Australia had been asked to be in the band, but he wasn't available yet. There's the picture of them smoking and drinking because they were young and dumb. And, of course, this is the OG version. Notice there's 12 tracks. You might know the Lemonheads cover of Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel, which is the 13th track, not on this one. Also, track number 5 is called My Drug Buddy, because Evan wrote a song about his drug dealer. And then, of course, they tacked on Mrs. Robinson as track 13, and they changed the title of song number 5 to just Buddy, although it's still the same song about Evan scoring drugs. So, that's your intersection involving Juliana, Frida, and John from the Blake Babies. Probably less appeal than when I did Crosby, Stills, and Young.